So here we are, we're just checking out the bay.
Is that our introduction?
I don't know, well maybe we need to think about it.
No we don't, we just need
Yeah,
to
I
be
think
like,
that's fine.
Well,
hey,
we'll just
this is Matthew, this is Zoe, this is Daniel.
Do you think we need to say, do you think we need to say our names?
Reporting live from the bay.
On the bay.
I do concur.
So how do people usually get to the bay?
Well, it's really strange. I don't actually understand it myself, really. You just seem to arrive. There's no real link between the bay and the city centre. Lloyd George Avenue on the bus or the train seem to be the main methods of public transport. Lloyd George Avenue is a sort of deserted road which only the Bay car bendy bus seems to use. The volume of traffic on this road might actually suggest that the bay is out of the way and not very well used by local people.
Looking at Lloyd George Avenue itself, it seems to be missing the diversity of use that is still linking two places together, because as it is now there is no link between the city centre and the bay area. You just seem to arrive.
It's almost as if you pass through a social vacuum when you move from town to the bay. There's no real flow and you're oblivious to the areas you're travelling through.
So Cardiff Bay is isolated from the rest of Cardiff, because Lloyd George Avenue fails to establish a connection between the two places. It's ironic, because as the centre of Wales, with the Welsh Government being based there, it should be connected.
I watched a documentary once about Cardiff, and it said that Lloyd George Avenue was planned and created to become Cardiff Champs-Élysées. But Cardiff seems to have missed a trick, because instead of copying the good examples of mixed uses on the Champs-Élysées in Paris, Cardiff has done the worst thing possible by creating a mile-long avenue of faceless, characterless, unattractive apartment blocks, which fail to encourage social contact between the neighbours, let alone outsiders.
Like the Champs-Élysées, it's a type of monumental planning, but in this case the lack of human scale is at odds with the rest of Cardiff. Again, we can see Lloyd George Avenue and Cardiff Bay are isolated, only this time architecturally.
At the end of Lloyd George Avenue, you have the Millennium Centre. Isn't this just another example of monumental architecture? In a way, Cardiff Bay is physically isolated, as we've talked about, but more so it is conceptually isolated. The use of monumental is not only physically at odds with our surroundings, but also abstractly. I think it was Paul Renner that once said, "Architecture not on the human scale is barbaric."
I think barbaric's a bit much, Zoe.
I think she has a point. Whilst these types of buildings are pleasant enough, they don't really fit in.
Then you have the Senedd. It's just one symbolic landmark after another. The Senedd was designed to be an icon of open and transparent government with its glass surrounding. Westminster and Whitehall in London, where the UK central government is based, gives the opposite impression. Despite this, it's still a successful place with a variety of passing foot traffic consisting of tourists who are stopping temporarily before passing on to another attraction. The space is also used by politicians and everyday Londoners. The Senedd and Cardiff Bay aren't on the way anywhere and are instead your final destination.
You don't pass through Cardiff Bay, you just end up there. This is what sets it apart from Westminster and other places.
Well, if Cardiff Bay is isolated, then Butte Town goes one step further. It's an enclave within an enclave.
Ah, Butte Town. Even with all the regeneration that's gone on in Cardiff Bay and the surrounding area, Butte Town still ranks as one of the most deprived areas in Wales.
It has resisted attempts at regeneration, probably because of the boundaries that surround it.
Boundaries like the railway line, the River Taff, and at either end the bastions of middle-class living, John Lewis, the Millennium Centre, and there's even a five-star hotel, the Radisson Blu. The question is Butte Town keeping the rest of Cardiff out, or is the rest of Cardiff keeping Butte Town in?
I think it seems like Cardiff is keeping Butte in. Just look at the traffic and how it's been diverted.
Didn't Butte Street used to be a main road?
Yeah, it was. It used to be part of the A470, up until Lloyd George Avenue was built in around 2000. Now it's an unclassified road. As far as Cardiff is concerned, it doesn't even exist.
An unclassified road is a road with no defined destination. Lloyd George Avenue, on the other hand, only has one defined destination, Cardiff Bay, and seemingly no other uses. Lloyd George Avenue and Butte Street both occupy two extremes, but both ultimately fail. Whatever it is, Butte Town is isolated, and the isolation experienced by Cardiff Bay just exemplifies this.
Butte Town at least holds on to its history, whereas Cardiff Bay...
Well, I don't live in Cardiff, but when I visit Cardiff Bay, it doesn't tell me much about its history. History is important too. A place needs to have links to the past.
It does, Matt. I remember a quote from Invisible Cities by Italo Calvino. The city does not consist of this, but of the relationships between the measurements of its space and the events of its past. As this wave from memories flows in, the city soaks up like a sponge and expands.
Well, if a city is supposed to be like a sponge, then Cardiff Bay is not a particularly successful one. Being so isolated, what culture, what memories does it have to soak up? They seem to have been erased from the area.
Cardiff Bay is at least successful in attracting tourists, as almost every piece of place needs to attract visitors. Restaurants, nightlife, different sorts of events, grand buildings.
Whether all these pieces fit together is another question, though. Whilst all the important pieces are there, the underlying fabric of the area that should hold everything together, the roads, the people, the diversity of the use, these things are missing. Even tourists can see this.
It's not always like that, though. It has bursts of energy, of vibrancy, where it shows what it could be. Obviously in these pictures you can't see that, but it exists. It's out there.
So there are a few problems with Cardiff Bay that we've talked about.
There's Lloyd George Avenue and the failure of the monumental.
There's a lack of diversity of use and the fact that Cardiff Bay exists only as a destination.
Then there's Butetown, which has long been segregated from Cardiff Bay, a fortress within a fortress.
What's the one thing they all have in common, both physically and conceptually? Isolation.